Well, hello everyone. Hello, community creatives and con folks out there. Today, or not just today, but this entire week, we will be talking about RPG mechanical systems. Your favorite mechanical system in any system you love, any system you're not playing but you like something. Some games that you hate, but there's something about it that you kind of like or you wish you could port over. Any and all of them, and we're going to talk about it the entire week, and not just in our little collective here. We're not just going to talk about what the system does, but we're going to talk about the psychology of why some of those systems work, even though they seem awkward. Um, the time it takes to use some of these systems versus others. Some are really simple. Some you have to go through a couple of steps to get to it. Plenty of these systems require changing a like psychological mindset, thinking in a different manner. Some systems require you to think uh, outside of the body of the characters, and others are into it. Um, yeah, yeah. In the chat, of course, the guys always get together, start talking and stuff. Some brilliant people. Yeah. Alex C says not sure about a favorite, but I know a least favorite is Thaco, which we will also go into quite a few definitions. For example, Thaco stands for two hit armor class 0, which was a bizarre +10 down to -10 kind of thing going on. But anyway, yeah, all week we're going to talk about it, and we're gonna hit the biggest one first thing this morning. Okay, so a couple of Azala says, I'm here just seeing my boyfriend off to work. First day of the new schedule. There you go. New schedule for your life, and a little bit of a new thing for us. Not quite new, but just something to sit around, think about, talk about, whatnot, as usual. And I'm glad you could join us. One of the things um, that I also want to point out is that this is not, we're not going to go down the path of like what game is the best. We're also not going to go down like whether it comes to cost or availability, or anything like that. But there are plenty of mechanisms in games that we can re-flavor for our own, whether we're designing our own games, whether we are playing a game, but we want to add something into it. Yeah, I know Vince has a ton of them. Vince says, I love a lot of mechanics from Blades in the Dark, which is we're definitely going to bring up that. Uh, some favorites are position and effect, downtime actions, and load. Yeah, I have to say Blades in the Dark clocks the high risk reward die system, and some of these mechanisms may just be maybe some sanity checks. We're going to talk about Cthulhu sanity checks. We're going to go to the heavy hitter of the room, the aid system, or I call it aid system: advantage, inspiration, and advantage, inspiration, and disadvantage. Yeah, I had to. Yeah, I was getting a little haggard there. I was getting the neck beard, whatever. I'm an old dude. I gotta shave it down. But anyway, all right, guys. So we're gonna get into it. I will try to. I will ask of you guys to try to be. I understand the chat does not accept very lengthy descriptions, so try to be as very general in the mechanism you're thinking of for one of the mechanisms in whatever RPG game you're thinking of. Basically, for definition for mechanisms, it's not necessarily related to dice, but it is how you achieve a particular action or get to a particular moment from one place to another. It could be a randomizer, it could be measuring success or failures or anything like that. But try to describe that in the chat as best you can. And we are looking for things that we can generalize to other games as much as possible. Um, Alex sees I like the AD. I leave out the I. I rarely use inspiration, and of course, in any game, of course, many of these things are optional. Of course, and what we're going to talk about are the optional things. Okay, let's dive into it. So let's hit the heavy hitter. The heavy hitter, the world's most popular role playing game. Of course. Ooh, come on, chat, don't go away. Thank you. Vince says, so let's start with blades. With blades, position and effect. Before each die roll, you determine the effect and position. For example, when you sneak up upon someone to cut his throat, and you have to save a position. And let's see, Alex says, I let the bard give out the inspiration. Where it cuts you off a little bit, Vince. I think that's a wording problem where inspiration and bardic inspiration, I think they could have used two different terminologies to separate the two. Some people either get confused or think that the inspiration mechanic is reserved for the bard and those kind of things. But Vince continues with all those considerations change the outcome of the roll and define how high the risk and reward will be. All right. So before I get into that, let's talk about the heavy hitter here. I had to pull a random book. Oh, here we have Dungeons and Dragons. All right. 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. WotC has a system called advantage and disadvantage. There's a letter in the middle called inspiration. We will talk about it. But essentially, the generalization is that when given a die roll to have determine a random effect, you instead roll 2 dice, taking the higher or the better of the 2 dice for advantage and taking the worse or the lower of the 2 dice for disadvantage. The inspiration comes in when a player performs or acts or role plays in such a way or has such a great idea or whatever table metric you guys think of that the game master and or the players say, man, that is so cool. You get to get a roll. You get a point of inspiration, which in the Dungeons and Dragons allows you to roll a d20 and take the better, which is in d20's case, the higher roll, rolling 2d20 and taking the best result. Now, of course, there are, you can type in, dice metrics or dice random probabilities and such. And some people say that the rolling the 2 20-sided dice gives a net benefit of like +3. What is that? Really, Kitty? Really, while I'm doing my thing? Really, Kitty? All right, sorry. It comes out to be roughly +5 -5 on the roll. The reason why there's a little bit of a swing when rolling 2 20-sided dice is because let's say you need to roll a 14 or better, and the first roll is a 17, then the second roll's importance becomes less because you can roll higher than a 17 on a d20, but it may not be necessary or even required. Here we go. Sorry, the chat seems to be rolling through. Vincent says, I generally like the advantage disadvantage, but the implementation is a bit clunky. For example, the simple fact that it doesn't stack and inspiration seems like an afterthought. There is no stacking. The die roll of d20 is very swingy, meaning like there's an equal chance of rolling a 1 as rolling a 20, just like anything else. When rolling advantage or disadvantage. But advantage and disadvantage can be ported over into any die system, whether you're rolling percentile dice, whether you're rolling d6s, whether you're rolling dice pools or anything like that. It could very easily be ported over. Now, like I said, we are going to dive into more of psychology of the die rolls, and there's the possibility that that when rolling the dice, it's far more than just dice. It is about the psychology of waiting for the results. So for example, how can I explain this? People love, it's a gambler's high, and people love to see random results. And the randomness, the swinginess, the wildness of rolling a d20 stacks onto that because you're rolling two d20s. Now, there is nothing predicting what you're going to roll. There are many times in Dungeons and Dragons where you get advantage and you roll two very low rolls, or you get disadvantage and you roll two very high rolls. There's nothing. The one die roll doesn't affect the other one. Like Rickard says, the dice have no memory, right? But Vincent says you can't really equate that to a fixed bonus. The biggest thing advantage does is preventing really low rolls. And the idea is that there's bounded accuracy, which that's something else. Bounded accuracy basically means has an advantage disadvantage has taken away stacked bonuses. So instead of people hunting for bonuses, which isn't which stimulates a different player's mindset, instead it's more of randomness and outcomes. And the draw for randomness outcomes is that you don't need to be skilled. You don't need to have built-in preconception on rolling the dice. Everyone gets to see what the dice are. You roll them, and boom, that's happened. Alex C says when they roll double 20s, I let them have max damage and then doubled. Vince says, what do you do with double ones then? Insta kill of your character. Everyone has their own home rules, but the point is that the randomness of the dice stimulates a part of the brain that may not stimulate those who are more statisticians, which may fall further into, say, games that use dice pools, or instead of having advantage, disadvantage, where you're rolling two dice and taking the better of the two, that you get a net bonus of +5 or -5, or a boon or bane die, which is rolling a d6 and adding it to it, or rolling a d6 and subtracting it. Yeah, we're going to go into the whole thing. Yes, we're going to go down exploding dice. We're going to go down dice pools. We're going to go through random charts, random fumble charts, random crit charts. We're going to go through all of those as basically separate mechanisms in and of themselves. But the reason for the advantage disadvantage, which makes it a brilliant mechanism, is because in the old days, there was a desire to have a table that took into account all of the benefits and penalties related to someone's action. So, for example, if someone were riding a horse trying to fire an arrow in a thunderstorm through a muddy field, there would be minuses for being on horseback, minuses for being in the dark, minuses for the rainstorm, minuses for the horse running through mud, which affects the rider, minuses for range. There would be penalties there would be benefits for taking an aim, and there would be benefits for reloading your dice, and it would be, reloading your bow or what have you, or there'd be benefits because the opponent is illuminated in the dark or something, and you had this laundry list of +1s, -2, +3, -5, +2.5, per 30 feet, or all these kind of things. And what you had then were number hunters. Some people would claim that Pathfinder is sometimes referred to as Mathfinder, as one of the largest, most popular games that does this, where you have stacked bonuses and stacked penalties, and of course, the person trying to find the net gain of the most stacked bonuses on these charts. And what advantage disadvantage does has eliminated those charts, made adjudicating difficulties and advantages for the players and at the table down to rolling two dice and finding out which is the best or worst. And so I believe the net gain is not necessarily which dice are rolled and how you use them, which is up to you at your table. The net gain is not having to print off in a game book a page and a half of penalties and page flipping, and instead get straight to the game. The dungeon master, game master, what have you, doesn't need to look up rules. Players don't need to do that too. It's basically diving straight on in. Exploding dice is always foolish. Kiwi says I do the same thing on that ones. If it's your turn ends and something bad happens, and on the 20 you get your crit. You cut your hand, you knock the helmet sideways, etc. Good things happen. I'm the same way with that. What's up, guys? Prue, Deadman, what's going on, guys? Record, Vince. Rickard says, none dice mechanics, leveling system in Warhammer. You gain XP and buy new abilities with that XP. We'll go into that. There's some games that have living XP in them as well. We're going to go into that. Vince says, that you haven't encountered many RPGs yet. There are a ton of buy with XP systems out there. Yeah, absolutely. Gaining XP. Alex C says, I remember that when a class such as a cleric could have a high wisdom gains an additional 10 XP, 10 to their XP gain. That was with if you had like stats that were like a 16 or above or something like that, you gain like a plus 10% XP gain. Yeah, those things too. XP systems have changed quite a bit towards milestone systems. Hybrid, Vince says Cypher systems, a hybrid class-based systems with buy with XP systems. So for advantage, disadvantage, that's the big bully of the room. And I believe the net psychological gain and table gain is that it's very simple. Whenever a dungeon master has a penalty to give out to the players, whether it's dark, whether it's slippery, whether it's there's waves in the storm, whether the rocks are hard to climb up, whether there's lots of noise or there's an earthquake or something, you give them disadvantage. If the PC's got a great idea, we're going to work together. We're going to help lift this rock. I'm going to distract the bad guy while the PC helps out. I'm going to make a noise and make the bad guy turn around. I'm going to flank the guy, whatever the case may be. Long story short, the game master can just add advantage and you keep on moving on. Now, another system that these guys brought up is, man, they're going crazy. Reading in the chat, Vincent says, hard to call something mainstream in our hobby aside from the giants. It is very much, Fate Points is one of those things where you might consider Fate to be, or the systems used in Fate to be part of that as well. Rickard says, which is why I bring up less mainstream games. I got a ton of games that are quote unquote not mainstream that have those systems. Now, come on, kitty, come on down, come on. Sorry. Yeah, I love you too. But you can't have my attention yet. All right, there's the big games. The WotC, of course, is big. Shadowrun is big. Palladium isn't as in the forefront, but they're huge too. There's a couple out there that are heavy hitters, but there's plenty of people that haven't heard of games like Dream Chaser, Blades in the Dark, Rocket Age, Eclipse Phase. I've got some on the side. Index Card RPG. A ton of them. Fate, those kind of things. Foolish Kiwi says, I feel like the advantage and disadvantage is okay, but a bit ham-fisted, and direct plus minus modifiers to the character's roll based on RP actions allows you to give better bonuses for more creative tactics than always being two rolls. But like I said, the net gain from having advantage disadvantage is adjudicating the bonuses or penalties, unless of course there's a net plus or minus, and number hunting, which has been a drawback in some games, because depending on the situation, you've got stacked like a -1, +2, -3s going on until you finally get to your net bonus or penalty before getting there. And what happens is, like I said, it's a gambler's high. It's not about what makes sense. It's about what people feel. And sometimes the greatest designed mechanism is not the mechanism that feels the best. And so as game designers, and many of you out there are very creative, out there wanting to design your own systems, um, the the issue sometimes can be that a game, or a game you're designing, or a game that someone else has designed, doesn't gain traction. And it's not because it's designed badly. It hasn't taken into account the psychological desires or needs. It hasn't stimulated that pleasure center that comes about because of rolling certain things. Vince says, I think the biggest disadvantage of advantages is that your players stop thinking about getting a better position once they have an advantage, even if it's automatic, like the Barbarian Rage, for example. The yes and no depends on how simple or how complex you want a system. For example, we can move away from advantage, disadvantage into things like other randomizers, like Scott Poe says, the drama deck from Torg was a bunch of fun. Alex C says, in a way, losing hit points is better than losing real money on a die roll. Ricker says, I'd also say that another problem with disadvantage is the fact that dice sets only has one D20. Yeah, it's silly. All right. So let's go into position with Blades in the Dark, because we're going to talk about this quite a bit. Blades in the Dark, like the Fate game system, has a number of mechanical systems in which those mechanical systems, when stacked together, make something great or worse, and are easy to take away from. One of the things in Blades in the Dark is positioning, and it's used in that, in another game known as Zas Urkala, XAS, second word IRKALLA, believe, or Urkala. Anyway, the idea of in Blades in the Dark with the positioning is that you are allowed to choose how many dice you roll for an action. And by choosing, the more dice you roll, the greater chance you have of success, or greater successes, and a greater chance of failures. Prue says, most of the people I play 5e with mostly forget about inspiration. It's not that we don't want to use it, it just feels like an add-on, so we just get rid of it in a flow of everything. And of course, as many of you know, that inspiration, any game that has bennies in it, inspiration feels like it kind of took that aspect of it to add to that aid system and stacked it into Dungeons and Dragons without. It's easily removable, just like alignment is, where it doesn't affect the rest of the gameplay. And I believe they added it in there because there are many small pub games that have gained traction, such as Fate, that have some kind of Benny system in it, where you spend it to, a player earns something and then spends it to gain some other advantage down the road for being invested in a game, or having great ideas, or performing some heroic action, or creating excellent drama or something. But position and effect in a generalized term is that instead of applying how many dice or what the outcome is to a particular action, the players get to pick the greater reward. They get to play with the greater reward, greater penalty for the action that they are going to take. So so in essence, someone can say, well, I want to be very careful, and I don't want to be penalized for my action if I fail, so I'm going to roll less dice. Whereas, and I believe the dice pool goes from 1d6 to 4d6 in Blades in the Dark. But like I said, you can apply this to anything, pretty much to any other game system. And so what happens is the more dice you roll, the greater chance of success, because you have up to 4d6. But for example, using Blades in the Dark and using this in your own game, let's say, for example, that the more ones you roll on those d6s, the greater the disadvantage, the penalty, that backs you into a worse position. So in many ways, the risk reward system in that, once again, it's a psychological thing that tickles the fancy. When people are sitting around, in Blades in the Dark, you play basically criminals, gang members. And if you're trying to sneak into a hidden location, or you're just trying to scout out what's going on, you might not want to risk yourself and the rest of your gang. So you may only want to roll one die, so that if you fail, it's not going to harm you that much. Whereas maybe you need to set off explosives to blow up the gang members' lair, and so you want a huge risk reward for that. Hey, I really need to do this thing. I need more dice, but there's a good chance that I might fail and get captured or something of that nature. Prue says, sounds cool with position. I like that extra gamble with choosing your number of dice. I only think I've tried it in a couple of board games. Yeah. Alex C says, how do I gain XP when they gain a level? The XP drops back to 0 plus what's left over on top of the new level. Prue says, I'm going to need to buy Blades in the Dark. It sounds so sweet. It is actually quite neat. It has a number of stacked mechanisms in it that are quite sweet. Vince says, mechanically, it is the next generation dungeon world, a bit more complex and streamlined, with tons of great ideas to make things more smooth. And the higher risk reward, not only does it like hit that gambler's high, but it also means that the player and GM, because of the mechanism, are accepting the fact that, hey, if you're taking a higher risk reward, that means that I, as the game master, can adjudicate a far greater penalty against you rather than using a lower risk reward. So let me give you an example. You are scouting out, you're going through the dark alleys of a bad part of the neighborhood, and this is Blades in the Dark. It's very quasi-Victorian, with a mystical sci-fi element to it, kind of steampunkish a little bit, slightly. And you are just walking down the street, you're trying to mind your business, and all you're doing is you're casing the joint. Well, if you roll a low risk reward, let's say 1 die or 2 dice, then if you fail, the game master may go, hey, a rival gang member comes up and walks up to you to ask you what you're doing in the neighborhood, maybe just to intimidate you, to get you to keep moving on, find out who you are and get you to, get your ass out of there. Maybe you lie. You're like, oh, dude, I'm just walking down the street, minding my own business. Not much of a penalty for being caught. Maybe they recognize your face later on, but that might be the only penalty. But if someone takes a higher risk reward, maybe one of the rival gang members recognizes your gang colors or how you're walking, or wants to surround you and call some backup, or wants to call the authorities because the authorities are in their pocket, or wants to pull a knife on you and attack you anyway, just for GP, right? So in many ways, you're taking it into your own hands, and that's where the drama comes from, by choosing the higher risk reward. Vincent says, there's also a devil's gamble in Blades. I think it's called that way, where you get another dice, but you have to take a bad side effect to what you want to do, which is, I believe that is the case. I've got a stack of books next to me. I've been looking through all of them, so my mind is a little bit like callywopped with it. But yeah, I believe that's the case, and I believe the idea for that is, again, it's a gambler's thing, right? A devil's gamble. It's I want to have this effect, but I'm probably going to suffer something on the back end of it, and putting that in the choice of the players as opposed to it being forced. Alex, he says some mechanics can be mechanics can be confusing by reading it unless you actually play it, which is also another problem with some role-playing games, that it's hard to get across what you're trying to achieve, even though the designer knows in their head what the outcome is. Fate has that problem with it. Rickard says, the combat round system for Rolemaster, you have 3 levels of initiative per round. The faster you want to go, the less you can do, or you can wait and go in the last level and do something big. While I would never use it myself, as I think combat takes too long already, I do like the idea of it. Rolemaster and Feng Shui use a similar style system. I'm going to call it step down initiative, or maybe ladder initiative. So we're going to go into that as a mechanism as well. So let's go to a step down initiative. And many games today have random static initiative. So you roll a die, you find out where you're at, and then you remain in that initiative order until combat ends. But most games, not most games, many games in the 90s did not have that. They had very unique, I would say, mechanized initiative orders and initiative actions within those orders. And some of them actually became quite interesting and quite unique. Like what Rickard says, talking about a Rolemaster, and what I'm bringing up in Feng Shui. Okay, so what is step down initiative? Step down initiative is that in the course of the game, you roll some dice and you achieve a number. Sometimes that number is large and you count down backwards, or sometimes the number is small and you start counting up higher. In Feng Shui, you actually rolled high and you count it down low. So for example, let's say we start at the number 10 or 20 or something like that. You start out at, say, a number 20, and each action you take costs a number of points away from that initiative track, and your next action happens on your next number. So for example, in Feng Shui, the basic thing was 3. So for every action you took, you move down 3 on your initiative track. So if you had a 20, your next action would happen on 17, and then 14, and then 11, and then 8, and et cetera, et cetera. And each person went down the line. So as a game master, you go, okay, we're on 20. Who gets to act? Okay, 20. Then you count to 19. 19. Who's on 19? And then who's on 18? Of course, you're looking at your bad guys. Who's on 17? Who's on 16, et cetera, going down the line. Now, what would happen is that based on whatever, there are a number of actions where as you're counting down, they would either extend further or make it shorter. So in Feng Shui, if you wanted to do a snapshot, which was basically like, I need to act quickly because my first action was on 20, the bad guy is going to try to throw a grenade. The bad guy is going to go on 18, but my next action happens on 17, if you guys are following me, right? So instead, you can say, well, I'm going to take a snapshot, and I want to take my somebody put in the thing 357 or 50 caliber Desert Eagle, someone wrote in the chat, and I want to blow the bad guy away so he drops the grenade at his feet. Well, the snapshot means that you would get a penalty because you're trying to move faster. So if you normally went on 20, but your next action you want to go on 19, you would get a cumulative -2 because normally you would go on 17 without a penalty, if you understand what I'm saying. So the faster you moved on the initiative track, the more penalty you would receive. There are some systems that move the opposite way. So you start at 1, and then I want to attack. Okay, you go on 3, or you start at 1, and then you go on 4, then you go on 7, then you go on 11. Whereas if you want to move faster, you would have a penalty for it. Also, there were things such as spells, psychic abilities, things like that, where maybe a spell pushes you up or down the initiative track by 5 or 6 rather than a 3. Or I want to run over and chop the rope on the portcullis to make the portcullis fall down to trap the enemy inside the courtyard, or the dragon in between the castle wall, the 2 portcullises inside, or whatever the case may be, right? And the game master could say, okay, that's going to cost you 4 actions to get there. It's going to take you 4 seconds or 4 rounds or whatever, however it's measured in the game. And those 4 may take you longer to get there than the enemy, which might have a movement or move action of 3 or what have you. Or maybe you can get there faster, like by subtracting 2 from it. But then when you get there, you have a cumulative -2 penalty. I understand that that type of step up or step down initiative can be a little confusing, but it also puts some tactical methods in there where people are not cemented into my action, then your action, then my action, then your action. In other words, it allows people to take upon themselves, I want to act quickly, and there's a chance I might fail. I'm going to react slowly and get a bonus to hit or something like that. I want to aim at them. Okay, you'll get a +3 to hit, but that means it's going to cost you 3 more actions down the initiative track, right? So that you can wait. Azala says atomic highways, streamlined gear, such as a heavy pistol, can be anything from a 357 to a 50 cal Desert Eagle. A sword could be a katana to a machete. No need for a huge list of dozens of different pistols and I'm sure blades. Alex C says, I remember that spell level actually drops your initiative down. Yep. I like that concept, but it tends to bog down the game a bit at times. And that's one of the things about some of these mechanical systems. Depending on the feel of the game, sometimes you want to slow things down or speed them up. And the simpler the system, usually the faster it goes, but the less detail you obtain, right? So, for example, like Azala mentions that, you don't have a laundry list of pistols or blades or something, which makes it easier to adjudicate, hey, I'm going to pull my blade, and you just describe what your blade is. But on the other hand, there are some people who like nuance, who want to know that a Walther PPK is different than a Glock, which is different than a 6 hour. You know what I mean? There are some people like that nuance, and that's good for them, but that may not apply to the specific game you're playing, especially if it's rules light or rules heavy or something like that, or whatever you're trying to design. Rickard says, Rolemaster was more than you have to simplify. More than that to simplify. 3 actions per round, and you got to use 1 extra action for each level on the initiative you waited before you acted. So like in Rolemaster, and I believe this is the case that has been brought back for Pathfinder 2.0, in which you have 3 actions, and those 3 actions per round allowed you to do things like, I want to attack, move, and attack, or I want to move, and attack, or I want to move, attack, move, or you can mix it up a little bit. And I haven't read Rolemaster in a long time, but I have played it before. And in Rolemaster, some of those actions cost you more than others, or you can use a wait action or combine an action. So, hey, instead of a move, attack, I'm going to stack my action, 1 or 2 of my actions, and then attack, putting you slower than other people, but becoming more accurate, right? So if someone for example, if let's say we take 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and I know there's movement, there's action, there's bonus action, but if you ignore all the words and just say, okay, you get to do 3 things. If you move and attack, those are 2 actions, and then you have a 3rd action, in which case you can do something, whether it's like become more defensive or what have you. You could make the case that, okay, well, if you're going to say, I want to wait, and then strike when my time is hot, you can say, well, okay, since you're spending 2 of those actions, I'm going to give you +2 for each of those actions, giving you a net bonus of +4 or something like that. I know I'm going down. We're talking about mechanisms without it being written down and without me showing you examples. But yeah, those are some things for mechanisms where you have stacked initiative. I believe it was 2nd edition that had speed for spells as well as weapons. And the smaller weapons went faster than the larger weapons, but the larger weapons could strike first because they had longer reach. And there was those weapon speeds affected initiative, and I can't remember how it affected it up or down. But yes, so a dagger could move faster, but a polearm could reach further. But once within range, the dagger could dart in and out faster before the polearm person could readjust their polearm to strike back, thereby affecting initiative. And of course, depending on how good or how fast you were, that would affect it as well. Foolish Kiwi says, my group is one of those rule heavy in combat, rules light when not on the grid type of deals. Ends up a happy medium. Yeah, of course. We all do that. We all modify or decide to use or not use, implement the rules thereof based on what we'd like to do. Alex C says single shot is single shot per round. Semi is 2 to 3 rounds per round, and auto is 4 to 6 rounds per round. Oh, you're probably talking about weapons and such. That like an automatic fire would be 4 to 6 rounds of ammo, rounds of shots per round. I get it. Especially if you're counting ammo, that can be a thing too. So if a weapon has 17 shots and you're firing off 4 or 5 shots, you get a penalty. You get a benefit for shooting off more rounds, but you might get a penalty because, of course, you can run out of ammo. Rickard says, I do love a streamlined gear system. Gives me more room in making my character feel like I want them to without having to track down the exact equipment to make it work. Yeah. Alex says, oh crap, forgot the weapon speeds. Yeah. Weapon speeds were a big thing too. Yeah. Weapon speeds were a thing in second edition Dungeons and Dragons. And I believe there were quite a number of modern games that used to do that back in the late 80s, early 90s with weapon speeds, in terms of drawing the weapon, tracking the person, firing the weapon, or how many rounds you could fire out of it. There are some weapons or some mechanisms where you can fire more rounds, so you have disadvantage to hit, but advantages on hitting, right? So the more rounds you fire, the harder it is to hit the person, for whatever reason, just trying to track them. But you have a greater effect on the other hand. Although in a modern day context, I think we tend to think of, Deadman says GURPS had weapon speeds. Yes. Although in a modern context, we think of auto fire or spray weapons as having a better ability to hit because you're spraying more damage out there. You're spraying more slugs or lasers or particle beams or something, but you run out of ammo faster. Alex C says recoil can be a factor. I believe GURPS has recoil in a lot of their modern day setting as well. And again, that depends on what kind of nuance you want, right? Do you want to add recoil? Do you want to add spray, auto fire, suppressive fire, with modern weapons, which many of us think of as needing, except if you're playing in a rules-light system, like say Dungeons and Dragons, when people start talking about firearms in medieval, inside of a medieval setting, we tend to forget that Dungeons and Dragons does not have nuance, right? There's no impaling from spears. There's no bleeding from swords. There's no throat cuts from daggers, auto kills, or something like that, right? It's just, you either crit or you don't. You do damage or you don't. There's no excessive bleeding. There's no infection. There is some offhand penalty for using an offhand weapon or two-handed weapons if you're not skilled, but that's about it. But then when we start adding, like, I want to add firearms to my world, and then everyone starts to get in outrage because the first thing they think about are 2018 and what weapons are, as opposed to like flintlocks and I don't know, bunderblusts or whatever they're called, cannonades and all those kind of things, and how unreliable they were, accuracies, and then we start talking about spray weapons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, Gnu says, man, I love me some damage location tables. Those are fun, right? Although sometimes it's like, why would I punch somebody in the foot or the knee? You know what I mean? Or the accidental, like, I swing my sword and hit him in the elbow kind of thing. Bunderbuss. There we go. Yeah, flintlocks. Yeah, all those kind of things. Yeah, we tend to we tend to geek out, yet we become well actuallys, and sometimes you want to keep the well actuallys to a minimum at your table, because they they feed on each other, and if there's too many well actuallys, eventually they take over, and the game ends. The dice get put down, the character sheets get done, the books get folded in, and then all it turns into a whole cluster of well actuallying each other. Flintlocks, those take a bit to reload, but they end. But the up and down side about ballistics, they can bypass AC. I wouldn't say bypass. I would say I believe they have penetrating power, but not accuracy. Which was, that's the whole thing. Bullets can penetrate plate mail, so people say they're better. But then you have the fact of, in the hands of one individual, is it better, or is it the fact that they were used in conjunction, where you could use them with untrained individuals in mass, as opposed to having to train people with swords or crossbows or bow and arrows and such, right? Was it a factor of their penetrating power, or was it a fact of penetrating power combined with masses of people? And so that, I think, has a lot to do with it too. Whether it's war, whether it's pirates using, carrying around 5 pistols because you can only fire each one once, and then have to sit back and try to reload them again and all that kind of business. What's the chambering? The spiral chambering came out later, well after rifles were created. Alzalo says, I have a flintlock rifle. It's fun when it just doesn't fire the first couple times. Foolish Kiwi says, oh my God, almost forgot. The aiming mechanisms from Aces and Eights, where you fire at actual silhouettes under a transparent grid. You draw a playing card and roll dice to see how far and what direction. Oh, Aces and Eights. That's the microsecond, breaking down the microsecond gunfire rules. Yeah, that's a Aces and Eights is a unique mechanism, but it's actually pretty good. Foolishly Kiwi continues to say the shot directed from exactly where you aimed, so you could aim for the leg, and it accidentally sways to the head, which is it's like a modification from a hit location, random die hit location system. What do I have a random? Yeah, I got one here. A little hard to see this here, but because of the light, damn. But it's like a hit location die. It's a human silhouette body with like red markings. So like, let's see if I could turn this around here. There we go. Yeah, there's a headshot and there's a throat shot. Yeah, right there. Bam. Oh, groin. Ow. Right in the abdomen. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, these are fun. But then again, you could punch somebody in the leg or the shoulder, those kind of things. Right, punch somebody right in the back, which is kind of weird. Yeah. Oh, hit location dice. I'm always. I couldn't tell you. I apologize for that. I couldn't tell you. I'm not a dice collector, but when I see unique dice on like Kickstarters and things like that, yeah, I'll find these out. Yeah, I love these things. I love, again, since I've actually, let's see if okay, sorry. I've got 2 of them. There we go. The light come down. So I've got 2 of them. So actually, here we go. Advantage, disadvantage. You could roll two dice, because you're in hand-to-hand combat, and you roll this. So then you go, well, I'm going to punch him in the face and in the leg because I've got advantage to hit, or I'm firing wildly. So, those kind of things. So maybe you take the worst of the 2. I don't know, whatever. It's something funny. Thanks. Yeah. I will think about where I got them from if I can remember. But I've got plenty of dice that are strange shaped and don't have numbers on them, that kind of thing. Rickard says novelty mechanic, but Jenga tower from Dread or candles from 10 Candles. Ooh, damn. Those are cool. Okay, so we're getting to the end. So let's talk about Dread and 10 Candles before we go, because hell, there's, like I said, at first I thought game mechanics all week. There's no way we can go through this. Hell yes. We just touched on Blades in the Dark, which got a ton of them, and I've got a stack of books over here. Index card RPG, Tiny Frontiers, which also has another game system. Come on there. A Single Moment, which is a samurai game. Dream Chaser, which is another one that's got a great system in it. Of course, we have to talk about Vampire. Look how beat up this is. First edition of Vampire the Masquerade, with a number of systems they have in there. Ring of Fire, Within the Ring of Fire, sorry. Which is a great game system. I can't even pick up the rest of the books. So let's end this with thanks, chat, but let's end this with Dread and 10 Candles. Okay. Story dice are cool too. Rory's Story Cubes. Yes, I do. I have a full complement of every Rory's Story Cube. And as a matter of fact, Rory's Story Cubes actually has a board / role-playing game system that has come out that they are experimenting with. When I went to Origins this year, they showed it off. I didn't get a chance to play, but basically there is now an adult level game system attached to Rory Story Cubes. So anyway, for those who don't know, there are two indie games that have people who've played them swear by them. I have not had a chance to play either one, but there is Dread and 10 Candles. Dread is based on the classic Jenga tower, tumbling tower. I'm not going to stand up and get one, but I have one. Those are basically the stacked. You know what? Hell, shit, I'll do it. Damn it, guys, got me off the camera. All right, there we go. Jumbling tower, because Jenga is a you know exactly what I'm talking about. So Jenga is a brand name, so you can buy these. You can buy, jumbling, tumbling towers, stack block towers, anywhere. The idea behind Dread is that it is a horror game, and every time you perform an action, and I'm being very general here, every time you perform an action, you must pull a block. When the tower falls, you die. That's, in short, that's it, right? You pull a block to perform an action. If you don't knock down the tower, you live. If you knock down the tower, you die. And of course, the game is called Dread because as a person moving through a horror type world, whether it's like ghosts or you're being hunted by a maniac with a knife or chainsaw or whatever, you're werewolves or vampires or any other kind of horror type setting. It's the thing is that it's not if you're going to die, it's when, and if you're going to take an action and when, and how are you going to run? How are you going to hide or lift or move or help someone or all these things? And are you going to take those chances? Yeah. And Alex C says just that simple. You roll badly, pull a block. And the idea behind it is not saying Dread is the only game you can use it with, but again, using a jumbling tower type system for a role-playing game may seem kind of odd, but the psychological idea of pulling a block and waiting for this thing to fall down outweighs other randomizers, right? It's a psychological tool of design that I believe is brilliant, which surpasses rolling a die or drawing a card, which doesn't have the same visceral that visceral panic when you try to pull a Jenga block and everyone is sitting around waiting for that Jenga block to be pulled and for it to fall or not fall, right? Tesla says, I wonder if you can build a dice tower out of Jenga blocks. Yes. I think if you, wow, I'm going to say yes, because I think I'm a glass half full kind of person. I think you could probably do it. I think you could go about a way of having dice, like a dice tower or dice stacked together or something, or um you grab all your RPG dice. You get to pick any die you want, but if you everyone wants to grab the D20 because it's like the better die than like a D4. But if you grab the D20, it might make them all tumble down and fall. So you have to grab the die that you think won't make the other dice fall down or spill down a funnel or fall off of a thing or something like that. Vince says, how would this work? You mean the Jenga dice tower? Oh, I don't know. You could stack them with a hole down the middle, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, moving over to 10 candles as an example, as well as this Jenga tower dread mechanic. The point of it isn't really whether you succeed or fail. The point is everyone sitting around panicked whether it's going to fail or not. And I believe that is the idea. Vince says the dice tower because Jenga works because they are long. I'm not exactly sure how you would do it. I'm sure given a little bit of thought or design, you could have like a dice tower, maybe stack the blocks with empties down the middle and then stack all the dice down the middle. And then you can move blocks and grab dice out of the middle without it falling down. So you have the chance of pulling a block or pulling a die out of the block or something. I think you could do that. I think you have some fun with it. Vince says you could never pull a dice without everything tumbling down. There's some spaces depends on the blocks, but I think there's some spaces in there. Anyway, okay. So 10 candles works similarly with the psychological effect as a Jenga tower. 10 candles is a game where, and of course this is about mood and about theme, right? So 10 candles is you get 10 candles, you light all 10 candles, and as you perform actions and or fail in those actions, you blow out a candle until such a time when all your candles are blown out. And so what happens is each person has 10 candles in front of them, and the best time is to play in a dark area, turn out all the lights. All you have is your character sheet in front of you. The light is dim. Maybe there's 4 people playing, so you have 40 candles lit. So there is some light. If you have a way to dim lights or something like that, you can dim the lights down. Of course, this sounds very thematic. It tries to immerse you into the game. The lighting of 10 candles and only having candles lit around you creates its own atmosphere because you're in a globe of light where there's darkness on the outside of you, especially like if you're in a basement or like a hotel room with the lights off or something like that, or wherever. Doesn't really work in a library where you're not really allowed to light candles. But you have 10 candles, and as you perform each action, a candle goes out, and it is a physical representation of your life. Slowly, things are turning bad until you die. Right, until you fail, until you succumb to evil or whatever the case might be, and the symbolism of candles going out, I've heard really elicits this idea of can elicit a psychological impact in the brain that makes you think of pretty intense emotions. From what I've heard about 10 candles. Vince says, I think stacking dice above each other would be a neat substitute for a Jenga tower. I think so too. Vince says that's where having high quality, non-tumbled precision dice comes into that meta. Yeah. Alex C says some things are hard to explain, best to show. Exactly. I think you could, you could stack D6s easily. D20s are a lot harder to stack, so that could be a thing where you take your classic dice and you start to stack them. But the higher you have a higher chance of success with like a D20, but a greater chance of it falling over versus a D6, which is flat on the bottom, right? Prue says, sounds awesome. I love intense games. Wouldn't use them for a campaign, exactly. But we use them for one-shots or specific scenes in a campaign. Vince says, just mix different types of dice to make it harder or stack multiple ones each time. D20s have mass, less space. Yeah, you guys. But the idea of using certain things, for example, I believe someone mentioned Deadlands, and using classic 52 cards as a randomizer or a mechanic is also a psychological thing, in which it puts you into the mindset of what you're at. When people talk about immersion, whether it's wearing outfits or using mood music or having candles or scents that create a thing, it immerses you into the drama and the danger of what's going on. It is a constant physical representation, a visual representation, and even audio representation of what's going on. Candles, you can feel the heat, you can smell the sulfur or whatever it is. A Jenga tower, you know, when it falls down, you see it slowly start to fall over and everyone panics. It's like, oh no, you know, it's the person who has to pull that one block, and you know that their action, it's necessary for them to do this thing, but they still have to pull that one block and whatnot. Whether using classic playing cards and you're doing like a gambling thing. Yeah, timber. Yeah, that is a visceral reaction, which of course is not physically in the game, right? You aren't walking around, you know, a scary haunted mansion with a Jenga tower in your back pocket. But your feelings go with it, and so the psychological need for that far outweighs the say using a die pool mechanic, right? And so some indie games have been able to use that. It's not really good for campaigns like 10 Candles, Jenga towers, things like that. But you know, if you are a game designer, and emotion is a great, powerful selling tool. Word of mouth is a powerful selling tool. If you really want somebody to play a game and walk away from that to brag about it, thinking of those kind of things will really help you out. Rickard says it's the inevitable failure that everyone knows will happen. Vince says, yeah, a lot of people try to use these Jenga mechanics for regular campaigns, which I would not suggest. It works because of the very specific atmosphere you created by using these. Absolutely. Azala says, we played strip Jenga before when a game didn't pan out, managed to catch a picture of a player right as it was falling. The look on his face was priceless. Strip Jenga. I wouldn't want to sicken everyone with my loss in strip Jenga. I don't think anybody would recover from it. And I wouldn't want those pictures getting out there. I'd be pretty upset. Full of Kiwi says, allowing players to gamble in the tavern with real cards and coming up with card games is a great atmosphere maker and a gold sink. Yeah, absolutely. Prue says, I love those timers from ICRPG. I frequently use them in 5e. Timer in the DC map. Okay, guys, you guys are, of course. ICRPG, that's what this is. Index card RPG. We're going to talk about that too. So we can't blow our load or for us guys or reach our climax there, ladies. Let's hold off. Let's calm down. Take a deep breath. Get some fluids in us. We've got tomorrow to get into this. We're going to continue with mechanisms and all those things. We are all collective, and we will definitely come up with these new ideas. I guarantee you, when this stream ends, oh, I know we'll do that first thing tomorrow. We'll hit the ICRPG, the timer, the DC for the map or the room. Although it's got a little thick. This 2.0 or whatever. Anyway, this version is a little thick for a rules light system, but again, sometimes the psychological aspects, the emotional part that some of these mechanisms elicit outweighs the that doesn't make sense, or that seems too simple, or that seems a little too complicated. Sometimes those things are actually far better. So anyway, guys, thank you for joining me. As always, when we hit the hour mark, the wife's off to work. Baby, have a good day. You're very welcome. Guys, we will have see you tomorrow. Yeah, this version of the book is the hardback all black version. I have 1.0, which is this, but it's the black is actually white from Runehammer. But everybody, have a good day. Hope you have a good lunch, good evening, go to sleep, or whatever. We'll talk about these game mechanics tomorrow. Again, this is episode 1. All week we'll be talking about the same thing. I guarantee you guys will be like, oh, I forgot to talk about, or oh man, I remember this other game, or I remember this thing. So yeah, guys, have a good one. Everything else is down to the doobly-doo. If you don't know who I am, if you do know who I am, of course, you know, it's us. We deep dive with the creatives, the community, and the kind folks out there. So everybody have a very good day. I'll see you tomorrow.